For this video, we're going to look at problem 523, which comes from the job order costing chapter. Okay, so we're looking at a medical center that uses a job order costing system to assign costs to patients. So essentially, each patient is a job. That's how they're looking at this, the costing in this hospital. So they talk about the direct materials and the direct labor costs for each patient. And they mention that all other costs, such as depreciation of medical equipment, insurance, utilities, incidental medical supplies, etc., are treated as overhead. And historically, McCullough has used one predetermined overhead rate based on the number of patient days. Okay, so that's their allocation basis. They allocate overhead based on patient days. I'm just going to call it PDs, patient days. And recently, a member of the hospital's accounting staff suggested, hey, maybe we should use two predetermined overhead rates, one based on the ICU and one based on the rest of the hospital. And then they give us some information about overhead costs in the ICU and the rest of the hospital, as well as two sample patients here, patient A and patient B. Okay, let's keep going. So they're required. Assuming McCullough continues to use only one predetermined overhead rate, calculate that predetermined overhead rate. Okay, so remember, overhead rates are overhead dollars per allocation basis, which in our case is patient days. So we need to figure out, okay, what are the total overhead costs and what are the total patient days? Okay, so total overhead. Well, we have the overhead in this table up here shown split between ICU and other. So let's just try to get that together. ICU, other. Fixed is easy. Fixed overhead, because they just give us the numbers. It's 3.2 million for the ICU and 14 million for the rest of the hospital. Variable overhead. They didn't tell us the total, but they gave us the components. So for the ICU, it's the rate of $236 times 2,000 patient days. That works out to $472,000. So our total overhead costs in the ICU, $3,672,000. In the rest of the hospital, the variable overhead costs are just $96 per patient day, and we had 18,000 patient days in the rest of the hospital. 96 times 18,000, $1,728,000, which adds up to $15,728. So our total overhead, we would have to add these two together, works out to $19,400,000. Okay. Total patient days. They give us that information. For the ICU, it's 2,000 patient days. Other, 18,000 patient days. That's just coming from right up here in the table. Add these together, I'm running out of space here, 20,000 patient days. So then to calculate our one rate, our one predetermined overhead rate, we're going to take, well, let's do it this way, the $19,400,000 of total overhead over our patient days of 20,000. And it works out to $970 per patient day. That is our one predetermined overhead rate. Okay, using that predetermined overhead rate, the single one, calculate the total cost assigned to patient A and B. So let's get a little table set up here, A and B. There they are. direct materials and direct labor were just given to us up here. So I'm going to write these down, DM, DL. Let me just move this up a bit. 4,500 for A, 6,200 for B, and we had 25,000 of direct labor costs for A and 36,000 for B. The last part we need is the overhead. Overhead applied. Well, we're going to use our application rate, which is $970. 970 times the number of patient days for A, 14. That works out to $13,580 for a total cost of caring for patient A, $43,080. For B, we apply overhead in the same way, 970, except they had 21 days. 21 patient days, 970 times 21, $20,370 for a grand total cost of caring for patient B, $62,570. Okay. Assume McCullough calculates 2 overhead rates as recommended by the staff accountant. Okay, so now they want us to calculate the 2 overhead rates, ICU and other. Okay, we've done some of the work for this already, so let's just bring this down. We have ICU and other. We've already calculated the total overhead costs. Total overhead cost for ICU, 3,672. So I'm just bringing that down here. 3,672,000. For other, it's the 15,728,000. Already calculated it. And they've given us the patient days split between the ICU and other. And if you recall, it's 2,000 in the ICU and 18,000 in the rest of the hospital. So 2,000 patient days here, 18,000 patient days here. So when we divide the 3.672 million cost by the patient days and the 15.728 million cost by the patient days, we end up with 2 allocation rates or predetermined overhead rates. For the ICU, I wanted to do that in red, it's $1,836 per patient day. And for the rest of the hospital, it's $874 per patient day. Okay. Now let's recalculate the costs of caring for patient A and patient B. We have our DM and our DL. As we know, it's $4,500 and $6,200 for the direct materials. For the direct labor, it's $25,000 and $36,000. Now, our ICU overhead applied. We're going to charge $1,836 per patient day. So let's just go and look. Oh, patient A had 0 days in the ICU, so that's easy, and patient B had 7. So we have no ICU overhead applied to patient A, but we have 7 patient days times our $1,836 per patient day rate applied to B. And when we apply that to patient B, it works out to $12,852. Now we're going to apply other overhead. So how many days did the 2 patients spend not in the ICU while in the hospital? Well, we're just going to do a little subtraction here. patient days not in ICU. So in the other parts of the hospital. Patient A spent their whole 14 days outside the ICU, and patient B spent 14 days outside the ICU and 7 inside. So here, we're going to calculate 14 patient days times our outside the ICU rate of $874 per patient day. And it works out to $12,233. We're going to use the same number because they were in for the same number of days outside the ICU. Adding these up, we have a total patient cost for patient A, $41,733 versus $67,285. Okay, let's just compare these. So patient A goes from a cost attached to them of $43,000 down to $41,000, while patient B has the opposite scenario. Originally, we attached $62,500 of cost to them, and under this new approach, it's $67,300. So what insights are revealed by the staff accountant's approach of splitting between the ICU and the rest of the hospital? Well, it reflects really that the costs, the overhead costs that are incurred in the ICU are just incurred at a more intensive rate. And it makes sense because those patients are getting intensive care. So the overhead applied to them should probably also be at a higher rate. And we see that in the rates calculated here. Like, it's more than double. The cost, the overhead cost of having someone in the ICU is more than double. So what this means is that under the old approach, what we may in effect be doing is overcosting our patients who are outside, like patient A. They may be getting overcosted, and that overcosting is subsidizing the costing allocated to patient B. So under the staff accountant's approach, this may be a more accurate way of attaching costs to patients. And that's the end of the question.